Hello, everyone. Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is the weekend. It is Saturday. No Premier League, of course. It is FA Cup final Saturday, though. Manchester United versus Manchester City. Seems like Eric Ten Hag is on the way out. Whatever happens, you have to think what is going to happen is going to be a Man City win. I cannot imagine any way that Man United win that game, but stranger things have happened in football. Anyway, lots to talk about when it comes to Arsenal, despite it being the Saturday, despite it now being the off season. We're going to talk about Emile Smith Rowe. I've got some information on him and his future. So we'll talk about that. Got lots of questions and comments from you guys as well. Talk a little bit about Bruno, who continues to be in the headlines, continues to be linked with a possible move to Arsenal and Manchester City as well. So plenty to discuss, but we'll start with Emile Smith Rowe. Now, I've already put out a story this morning. It's gone out on the daily briefing. You can find it on my social media. If you want to go and read the full story, I'll drop it into the description below as well. But I have information that Emile Smith Rowe, in the next couple of weeks, Smith Rowe and Arsenal, or Smith Rowe's people and Arsenal, will be sitting down to decide on his future. Now, he has 2 years left on his contract, but there is quite a good chance that he might well be on the move this summer. No certainty, of course. Ultimately, the decision rests with Arsenal. They had these talks last summer, and Arsenal said to him, "You're staying, you're not going." And so he stayed. And if they come in, sit down and say the same thing again, then, he is contracted, so he will stay. But whether Arsenal's stance has changed a little bit, because now he'll only have 2 years left on his contract. If he stays this year, 12 months further down the line, he's only going to have 1 year left in his contract, and he's going to be suddenly worth a lot less than he's worth right now. So you'd think Arsenal's stance may well have changed. Now, these talks, I believe, are going to take place in the next couple of weeks. They are scheduled. And it's going to be very interesting to see how it develops. Now, Smith Rowe has a very deep affection for Arsenal. Understandably, he's come through the club, come through the ranks alongside Bukayo Saka, but he's 23 years old now. And there is there's a sense of realization that at this point in your career, despite how much you love being at a club and have a deep affection for a club, at 23 years old, when your career has stalled like it has in the last 2 years, he's only made 5 starts in all competitions in the last 2 years, and they all came this season. He's shown bits and pieces of quality when he's come on. He's certainly shown he can make an impact. He could easily have finished the season with 6 or 7 goals, despite his limited amount of game time. Because when he does play, he gets in those areas where chances fall to him. He just didn't have much luck in front of goal this season. When you look at the chances he's had and how he's hit the woodwork, or he's had them cleared off the line, or the keeper's made a great save, he could easily have had 6 or 7 goals. And that's the quality of Smith Rowe, is when he's on the pitch, he just finds himself in that space. He works himself into good positions where he can hurt teams. And he showed that when he had that brilliant season when he was second top scorer with 11 goals, only behind Bukayo Saka, by 1 goal. So, the quality is there when it comes to Smith Rowe. There's no doubt about it, but he needs to play. 23 years old now. I think he was an England international not too long ago, but now, he's just barely getting a look in. His last start came in that game against Luton. He was man of the match in that game. And then in the following 10 matches between then and the end of the season, he had made 2 substitute appearances, and one of those was on the final day of the season. So, the key thing at this stage for him is stability and regular game time. If he'll get that at Arsenal, and then, he absolutely would like to stay. But if he can't get that at Arsenal, and you look at his situation and you just don't see a way how he is going to get that at Arsenal, then it really feels like the best thing for all parties at this stage is for him to move on. Arsenal get some money in, can invest that in a player that Mikel Arteta clearly wants to use a little bit more than he does with Smith Rowe, and Smith Rowe can go on and kick on in his career because he needs to, because he's such good talent. There's just no point. It's just a real shame to see him sitting on the bench. As much as it will pain me to see Emile Smith Rowe go, because as you guys know, I'm his biggest fan going. I really, really wish that Mikel Arteta would use him more, but it just doesn't look like he's going to. Now, West Ham were very interested in Smith Rowe in January. That interest was swiftly knocked away from Arsenal by Arsenal. There was no interest in letting him go out on loan. West Ham have had a change in manager since then. Obviously, Lopetegui's come in, David Moyes has gone. I don't believe there's been any fresh contact in sort of recent times while that managerial change has been going on. So whether they still remain interested and they'll rekindle that interest, we'll have to wait and see. There is plenty of interest, I'm told, both from Premier League and abroad. Smith Rowe's preference would be to stay in the Premier League if he has to leave Arsenal. I wouldn't say no to a move abroad, but his preference is to stay in the Premier League, where he believes it's the best league in the world and is where he wants to play. And I can't imagine there's not going to be plenty of interest in Smith Rowe. There's a lot of talk, when it comes to Emile, you always get to talk about injuries and things like that. But yes, like this season, he's had a couple of injuries, really frustrating injuries as well. Just as he sort of got himself into the team, he's got picked up an injury, but they've not been long-term things. For the majority of this season, basically the majority of the time since he came back from that groin operation, which he had the start of last season, he's been fit. He's just not been used. And that's why I just think it's just best. It's best to go. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below when it comes to Smith Rowe. What do you think the outcome of these talks should be? Do you think, like last season, Arsenal should tell him you're going to stay, you're going to be an important part of the squad? Or do you think this is the time that both parties decide to go separate ways? Here's one from Neil, who has got in touch in terms of Emile Smith Rowe, actually. He says, ESR played with a groin injury for a long time. Then he had surgery and had to recover. And best I can tell, he was not fully recovered before he played. And then he had to take another long layoff. It was not until well into the second half of the season that he approached full fitness. Will he go? Good question. He is finally fit. And seeing him come on versus Everton, we had a decent cameo, makes me think he will stay, not go. You know, I wouldn't be averse to him staying. But if he stays, I just feel like he needs to be used more. Because as you say, like against Everton, he had a good cameo when he came on. His last start against Luton, he was man of the match. And this is a player who can absolutely do it. And he shows when he's on the pitch that he can do it, that he can make an impact. I just wish he was being used a little bit more and turned to a bit more, whether that be in the left 8 position or on the left wing position, where, you know, he played so well when he first came into the team and scored all those goals. It's from out wide. You know, Martinelli's been struggling this season. I know Trossard's come in and done very well, but could Smith Rowe have been used more on the left wing? Potentially so. So, yeah. Thanks for getting in touch, Neil. Appreciate that. Moving on to Bruno. Lots of talk about Bruno and Arsenal. Obviously, it's been going on for a long time now. Reports yesterday that his release clause, which we know is until the end of June, isn't it? It's active until the end of June. 100 million release clause could be paid in 3 separate installments. Now, a lot of times when there are release clauses, those release clauses need to be paid in full. It's what Arsenal did with Thomas Partey, for example. And that's why they can actually be, as much as they sound like a good thing for clubs, they can be a little bit off-putting, because if you have to pay it in one big hit, it's a huge financial outlay. But it appears that Bruno, with the latest reports, could potentially be done in 3 separate installments. And, you know, as I said earlier, as you know, word that I've been getting is that we're probably not looking at another £100 million transfer this summer. And when you say that, initially you could rule out Bruno, but maybe this would be a way of getting around that. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see how it goes with Bruno. I think the Lucas Paqueta story and what's going on there, we know he was very much a target for Manchester City. Now he's been charged. You cannot imagine City are going to be going anywhere near that. It just wouldn't make any sense. And so they could well be putting all of their efforts into signing Bruno. We'll have to wait and see how it goes. But yeah, that's the latest on him, that this release clause can be paid in 3 separate installments, and Arsenal and Manchester City continue to be. I think it'd be a fantastic move. I really do. Look, I don't like him as a player. He's annoyed me. He's got under my skin, but you know, maybe every great team needs a player like that. There's no doubt about his quality. There's no doubt about the impact he can make. Just look at the impact he's made at Newcastle. Look at how popular he is at Newcastle. He'd be one of those players that when he doesn't play for you, you hate him. When he comes in and plays for you, you love him. And I'm sure he might have to win over the Arsenal supporters a little bit, and it's a big should, of course. It's all hypothetical. But should he actually come to Arsenal, he'd have to win over the Arsenal supporters, because there is a little bit of history there in terms of what's happened the last couple of times Arsenal played him. But I'm sure it would pretty quickly win them over. And when you look at a sort of midfielder to come in, and you look at what Arsenal need to do this summer transfer window, and where there is a real sort of need to absolutely improve the team rather than the squad, as myself and Team News and Ticks were talking about in our show yesterday, you know, that position in midfield is the one that just screams out for first team player right now, you know, to make that team just go up another level. And I think Bruno does tick those boxes. So it'll be interesting to see. But that's the latest on Bruno. Okay, some questions from you guys now. Mullen here says, update on Raya. I'd imagine his loan is about to expire if it already hasn't. I'm surprised we haven't made it permanent as soon as we can. Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much of an update on it. It's just I fully expect it's going to happen. You know, it was all agreed that it was going to happen when the loan deal was initially done. Everyone accepted that this was going to be a move that turned permanent. It was just initially a loan. I don't think it will probably happen until after June, the end of June, with the new accounting period starts, because the reason Arsenal couldn't sign him in this accounting year was because they didn't have the wiggle room with the PSR rules. And, you know, I think until once June finishes and we head into the new sort of year in terms of those accounts, I think that's when that move will be made permanent. So I think we'll have to wait a little bit of time before it happens and before it is confirmed. But I think once July hits, then I imagine David Raya will very much be confirmed as an Arsenal player. Here's one from Martin. Said, hi, hey CW, like your show and keeps us up to date, even as far as being in Zimbabwe. Thank you very much, Martin. Hope Zimbabwe is good this morning. He said, I was just wondering if we don't have a good striker from our academy, who can come in as we have an impact to save us money. I would have thought we would bring in Mika Biereth since he has been doing very well while on loan. Yeah, that's an interesting one, the Mika Biereth stuff. Now, he's obviously had a very, very good time in Sturm Graz, scored plenty of goals during that loan spell for them. Their sporting director, Andreas Schicker, has been speaking about Mika Biereth following his loan spell. And this is what he had to say. He said, Mika's intense style of play is even more important to us. He's always annoying. You can never take your eyes off him. He can contribute something crucial right up to the end. Yes, we want to try and sign Mika permanently. There is an appointment with Arsenal next week. Maybe they will quote a price that will be feasible for us. We can push our limits a little higher for a player like that. Now, I still think Mika Biereth is going to be sold this summer. I know he's had a very good time of it, and you sort of talk about it, don't you, Martin, about a striker who can come in from the academy and can save us some money. And Mika's certainly the one right now who could potentially do that because of his age and his profile. You've got people like Chido Martin, obviously, but he's so young, and that just feels very unlikely. But I still think that Arsenal will decide to cash in on Mika Biereth, because I think if he stays next season, he sits on the bench, I don't see him really getting any game time. His value is going to go down. It's kind of similar to following Balogun, and Biereth has said the same sort of things that Balogun said just before Arsenal sold. He doesn't want to come back and be a bench player now. He wants to be playing, starting every single game and scoring goals like he's been doing. So I think Arsenal sell him. Whether it's to Sturm Graz, we'll have to wait and see, because Arsenal will be looking for some decent money for Mika Biereth. I think Sturm Graz's transfer record is about the sort of £4-5 million mark. I think Arsenal would probably want more from that. So these talks that are planned for next week, it'll be interesting to see what Sturm Graz can offer. I mean, like Schicker says in this quote, says maybe they will quote a price that would be feasible for us. We can push our limits a little higher for a player like that. So maybe they will look to, smash their transfer record and bring him in, given the impact he made while on loan. But that'll be an interesting one. But that's the latest on him. Talks planned in the coming week with Arsenal. Brian now has got in touch and said, hey, Charles, what has been your favourite Arsenal transfer pursuit, ignoring if the transfer worked or not? I think my favourite had to be the Arshavin one. Yeah, look, I loved the Arshavin one. It was dramatic. There was highs, there was lows. It was like, it's happening. It dragged on the whole way through January, dragged on beyond January, of course, very, very famously. It went on, Arsenal, we as fans needed someone to come in and lift the spirits in that season. You had Arshavin, who had such a brilliant Euros with Russia, and you just wanted him to sign so much, and you thought it was going to happen, and then you thought it wasn't going to happen, and then suddenly it was going to happen again. It was an amazing deal, and then for it to actually go through the way it did, and even in those last minutes, looked like they'd managed to not get it over the line in time of the deadline. He was stuck in the snow. It was just such a dramatic transfer. So I think that one's right up there with one of the ones that's been the best to follow as a fan. I mean, the Ozil one, just on that day when it was sort of the 48 hours that it happened from the Tottenham game onwards to it actually happening on the Sunday evening, was just amazing. And the fact that Arsenal was signing Mesut Ozil was just the most exciting thing that happened at Arsenal for such a long time. And we were all so invested in it. I think that from sort of travelling back, because I'd been at the North London derby, beating them 1-0, was travelling back on the train, and then whispers started to come out on social media that Arsenal were pushing for Ozil. Wenger had given that interview afterwards in the front of the cameras when he did his little smile and he said, we might have a little surprise for you. And then it all started to come out. And I remember that Monday was just such an exciting day, waiting for him to come over and waiting for it to be signed. And I think Arshavin and Ozil were probably two of the really, really exciting ones for me. Dennis Bergkamp as well. I always remember where I was when the news came through that they'd signed him. I was playing football in the back garden with my brother, and my dad opened the kitchen door and shouted out the door to me, Charlie, we've got him. And so that was really exciting. And Sol Campbell as well. Who could ever forget that amazing day when Arsenal signed Sol Campbell? Cheers, Brian, for that. Thank you very much. Here's one now from, it looks like Ngor Francisco 2658. He says, Charles, what's going on with Charlie Patino? What does the future hold for him at Arsenal. Well, all I can say is what I've said before on Charlie Patino. I expect him to be sold this summer. He'll have 1 year left on his contract. He's come back from Swansea, where it was a bit of a hit and miss spell. Started pretty well, made a bit of an impact. There was a change in manager. I don't think that helped him too much. He still played plenty of football in the Championship for a player his age. That's a decent enough loan, but didn't probably go the way he wanted ultimately, and certainly probably didn't go the way that Arsenal wanted ultimately. He very nearly went last summer. The plan was initially that he was going to go last summer permanently. Then they changed that plan, decided to send him out on loan again, but he hadn't signed a new contract. So now he comes back. He's only got 1 year left in his deal. I can't see any way that he signs a new contract. And so it just makes sense that he will be sold this summer. He's got that Spanish passport, which makes him very, very appealing. He could easily go out on loan. Go out abroad on a permanent basis. His dad is Spanish. There's been interest from Spanish clubs before. I know that for a fact. So it wouldn't surprise me if that is something that is looked into. But there'll be Championship clubs looking at Charlie Patino as well. He's had two full years down at that level now with Blackpool. Swansea's clocked up a lot of minutes, got a lot of experience. And I just think he's going to go. It'll be a shame because obviously with such a talent coming through, there was a lot of people very, very excited, including me, in terms of what Charlie Patino could potentially do. But it's just not quite happened for him at Arsenal. I think he came through at the wrong time when the quality was raising at Arsenal. There was no real sort of pathway for him. So that's what I think. That's what's going on with Charlie Patino and what the future holds for him at Arsenal. I think the future lies elsewhere. But we'll have to wait and see as the summer progresses with him and all the other transfer stories that are doing the rounds at the moment. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Do have a fantastic Saturday wherever you are around the world. I'll be back tomorrow to do it all over again. Anything you want me to discuss in tomorrow's show, you know what to do. Get down into the comments with your questions, your opinions, anything like that, and I'll pull some of them together and get them included in tomorrow's show. Until then, have a fantastic day, everyone. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.